Welcome to A Quick Start to Programming with Java. I'm Dr. Kieran Agar, and in this video we're going to discuss using Eclipse. We'll actually open the software and look at it together. We're going to create your first Java program. It's going to be a Hello World program. Then we're going to talk about some basics with input and output of the Java programming language. And finally, we'll have to talk a little bit about variables, how to store different things in Java. In this video, we'll just touch on strings and ints, but know that there's more details with those coming later. So we'll start by opening Eclipse. Depending on your system, it may be a little bit different. You may know where you have it stored. On a MacBook, and similarly on PCs, you can usually search for different programs. So I'm going to search for Eclipse. I have a couple different ones installed, but you'll likely only have one, so I'm going to launch it by double-clicking on it. Note that if you knew where it was installed, you could just go find the application. It's always that purple icon here. Double-click on it, and it should start running. When Eclipse launches, this is usually the first box that you're going to see. So what this is doing is it's asking you where on your computer you want to store the files that you create in Eclipse. So usually it has something here by default. You can always click Browse and change it to anywhere on your computer. So as long as you remember where you put your files, it doesn't matter where you put them. So I'm actually going to browse just for the point of this exercise. I'll navigate onto my desktop and create a new folder called Week 1. Create. You can see that it actually created that there. But here, this is where I'm going to be storing my files. If you don't want it to ask you, you can hit that checkbox. I'm going to click Launch. Some of you, if it's the first time you've opened Eclipse, you may have a different screen show up. We'll wait and see. So this screen usually loads when you change your workbench or when you've opened Eclipse for the first time. So it's got different tutorials and things, but we're going to skip all of that and go directly to our workbench or where we can write Java code. All right, so here we are in Eclipse now that it's loaded. Your view may look a little bit different than mine just depending on the version of Eclipse that you have. They're always coming out with new ones. One important thing to note is you should be able to see the Package Explorer up in this window. If not, you can always go to Window, Show View, and there's a lot of different things here. So all of these different tabs that are open, you can get rid of. If you accidentally X out of them, this is a nice little way to go add more views. There's a lot going on here, so we're going to start off small. We want to start by having a folder in here where we're going to start creating Java projects. So I'm going to say File, New, and Java Project. Note that project is not okay. It has to be Java Project. And if for some reason you don't see Java Project listed here, you can usually find it by going in the other tab. So I'm going to select Java Project. This is where I'm essentially creating a folder to hold my Java code. When our projects get bigger in the future, we'll have a lot of different codes in this same folder. So you want to name it something that makes sense. I'm going to name mine Quick Start to Programming. Now, if you've coded before, then you would see other things listed in the Package Explorer. You shouldn't have to touch anything else in here. Do note that this is your version of Java you downloaded. Yours might be 8, 11, 12. So typically we don't need to mess with that. Also in your names, it's convention to not have spaces or a lot of special characters. So I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. If it asks me to create this module info.java, for now we're going to say don't create. We'll come back to that later. And then if I expand this folder, you can see this is kind of everything I downloaded. It looks like a lot and looks very scary, so I always like to leave this closed for now. And this is the folder where we're going to start putting our Java code. So SRC stands for source. We're going to be writing source code. So I'm going to create my very first Java class. I right-clicked here on the source folder and said New and Class. Note that by doing this, it automatically knows to place whatever file I create inside my Quick Start to Programming folder and then within the source folder. If I were to create this some other way by going up to File, New, Class, I would want to browse and tell it exactly where to put it. We're going to leave packages blank for a while here, and then we get to give our file a name. So I'm going to call this Hello World. In naming your file, it is convention to start with an uppercase letter and to use this kind of uppercase punctuation of letters when you've got separate words. Note that you can't use spaces, but this is following the convention for the name of a Java class. Also, I'll want to check this box here, public static void main string args. And what this is going to do is this is going to pre-populate my Java code with this line of code. So it's actually going to say public static void main string args. And I know at the moment we don't know what that means, but this is a lot better so that we don't have to memorize that line and write it over and over again. We can have Eclipse handle some of that for us. So once I've done that, I've named it, I know where it's going, and I've selected this checkbox to include what's called the main method here. I'm going to select finish. And you can see that it'll open it for you. This is our Java file. Note a couple things. We gave it the name Hello World. You can see here that it's called helloworld.java, so this is our file extension. And then also note that it's called Hello World right here. These two have to match exactly. If I were to accidentally mess this up and maybe have a lowercase, you can see that it's automatically mad. Usually these red underlined words are errors. So now it can no longer take my Java code that I'm writing and convert it to machine language successfully. So again, Java is going to be very picky about things like this. It pre-fills this in for you, so it's kind of best not to touch it. So let's start by what's in the green here. This is just an auto-generated comment from Eclipse. So a comment is a way to kind of write a note to ourselves in our code. It's completely ignored when we compile and run our program. So we'll talk about good commenting behavior later, but it's really good to get in the habit of saying, hey, these lines of code do this, or this variable is used for this. It's a really good way to keep your code legible. So you'll often see me just delete this, but feel free to leave that in here. I'm going to actually remove this part. These two backslashes is what makes it ignored by the compiler. This is what makes it a comment. So this is just a comment. So I'm going to say print out the words hello world. So this is a comment to myself. What I would like to do is print out the words hello world to the console. We'll talk about what the console is in just a second. But first, let's talk about how to print out words. So we know that computer programs can take input, they can produce output, they process things, they store things. Those are kind of the four main things that computer programs do. So I want to start by printing something. The way to print in Java is system.out. And you can actually see that Eclipse is trying to help you out. There's a lot of different things you can do. These are called methods. We'll get more into that later. But think about them as actions, things that I can do from here. You can always type it out yourself, or you can select it from this list. So I'm actually going to say system.out.print. And I'm going to write the words hello world with an exclamation inside some quotes. So now that we've got this, I'm going to save it, and I want to actually inspect it. My interface is putting a box around this, but note that I did not do that. You can see the normal character strokes here. So system does need to be capitalized. Again, with Java, it's very picky. So anything that you see me type capital or lowercase has to be exact. So no spacing between any of these periods. And then I've got the word print followed by open and close parentheses. What I put inside of these parentheses right here is what is going to print. So if I want to print out a word, I can print out any word I want. I can print out any sentence I want, a paragraph. The choice is yours. However, words, paragraphs, sentences all have to be enclosed in these quotation marks that you see here. So after I've completed this whole statement, I've got it printing out whatever I want, I do have to end the line with a semicolon. Note there's a couple other things going on here. I've got white space. What I mean is I've pushed my enter key, right? This spacing does not matter. However, I'm following some Java conventions here. You'll learn more about that as we move forward. Anytime you see this asterisk, it means that this file, you're modifying it, but it has not been saved to your hard drive. It's not stored on your computer yet. So I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to run it. Now this button, even though we know there's a middle step missing, we have to compile, right? It's going to compile and then run the program all in one step. So I'm going to click run. Note that if you forgot to save it here, it would pop up with an error message and ask you to save it. But I clicked run, and we can see that we actually printed hello world with the exclamation mark, with the space. And so we now have completed our first program. If I wanted this to say, hello Java programmers, I can save it. So I pushed Command S on my keyboard. You could push the save button, run, and you can see that now it's printing hello Java programmers. So this is the very basics of printing something out. Note that in addition to print, there's another method called print line. So print line, you actually don't spell out the word line, you just use the letters LN. And if we were to run this at this point, let me save it and run it, you'll see that it looks like it did the exact same thing. However, these have a vast difference. The difference between print and print line is that print line, after it prints the program, you can see, if you look closely, that my cursor is on the next line. So if I were to have a subsequent statement, I'll say again system.out.print, and I'm going to say welcome. If I were to have this subsequent statement, because this one is a print line, it prints hello Java programmers, then an invisible new line is printed. Note that I'm using a comment here just to denote this is ignored. And then we're going to print welcome on the next line. So if I save this and run it, we've got hello Java programmers, the new line, again, just caused by that LN here, and then welcome on the next line. This also means that if I were to have another statement, system.out.print, just print, not print line, and I say to your first programming video, end quotes. Note that I have a space here. I do not have a print line on this one. This is going to say, hello Java programmers, move to the new line, welcome, space, to your first programming video. Save it, run it so you can see it. And you can see the way that that prints there. So this allows you to kind of mix and match different things. I've got 3 different statements. This line really looks like it's all on the same line, especially if I remove this exclamation point. You can see that it looks like it's all in the same print statement, and only we know how we configured that. So now I'd actually like to take a minute, and now that we know how to print things to the console, I want to actually understand why we're writing the code on the lines that we're writing on. So let's take a step back and just observe the code that we have here. Yours may start on line 1 versus line 2 on mine, but either way, the first thing that you have written in your file, no matter what line number it's on, is you've got this class declaration. We already talked about how this needs to match the name of the file exactly. I want to focus a little bit more on this curly brace. If I highlight this curly brace or just put my cursor in front of it, you can see that Eclipse draws a square around this one. What this is doing is showing you that this is an open and closed pair. Just like with parentheses, we usually open a parentheses and then close it. See that Eclipse did the same thing here. The same thing with quotation marks, open and closed, right? This is where we open the file and then close it. You'll notice that this main method, and again, we'll learn more about what this part means later, also has a set of opening and closing curly braces. And within these curly braces, you can see Eclipse is going to highlight this in a fancy way. This is where I've written all of my code. For the next little bit, this is going to be where you write any code that you want to run. We'll talk more about styling, why this is indented, things like that later on. So now that we kind of know the setup, I want to move on to, we know the basic class setup. We know to write our code within this main method. Luckily, Eclipse is going to produce this for us. And now we know how to print different things and print versus print line. So I want to move on to how to get input from a user. So I'm going to write a comment here, getting input from a user. So typically, when you've used applications in the past, think Microsoft Word or Google Chrome, you've been the user. You're using the application that someone else developed or programmed. However, in this class, you're no longer the user. The user is whoever uses the program. You're the developer. You need to be able to develop a way where you can get some kind of information from your user and then use it in your program. So think about when you go to your browser, Google Chrome, Safari, you can type something in and it takes that information from you, the user, and does things with it. So we need to be able to get input. There's a couple rules with how to establish getting input from a user. First, we need to import the scanner class. What this means is that there's another class or another Java file somewhere. See how this is called a class? So there's another class called scanner that exists, and it's got all of the capabilities there that we need to get input from a user. Someone else developed it. It was downloaded to your computer when you downloaded the JDK, and now all we have to do is grab it and use it. You'll find that with learning object-oriented programming languages like Java, it's really nice that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can grab some code that's been used and use it again. So in order to have access to it, we need to import it. So the location where you import this file is important. So outside of these curly braces, if you don't have a new line, if your class is on line 1, you'll want to push enter. And above this public class, whatever your file name declaration is, you're going to write the following line. Import space java.util.scanner. You'll see that it has a warning. The warning is that you imported this file, but you never used it. So the yellow warnings we typically ignore at this point. Red is bad, yellow is just kind of getting ahead of itself. So this gives us access to some powerful stuff that allows us to get input from the user. So now that I've imported the scanner class, so check, that's done, I'm going to then create a scanner object. Now, you're going to learn more about objects later on. For now, think of them as something of the type scanner that you can use. So it's something that's going to help us get input from the user. So for now, this is some code that you'll just have to memorize. It'll become second nature to you. I'm going to say scanner keyboard equals new scanner system.in. Now, you're not going to understand everything going on with this line. Again, you can see the warning up here went away because I did use the class. Now I have another warning. It's going to tell me that this was never closed, right? Yeah, resource leak keyboard is never closed. We can ignore that for now. So this is a line that you will have to know over and over again. The only thing in this whole line that you could change is this. This is a name that I chose because it makes sense. I'm going to get input from the keyboard. But you'll see in your textbook, maybe they call this scan, maybe they call this input. It could be anything, right? So I like to use keyboard, and you'll see me use this over and over again for consistency. So this is the name of my object here. Note I've got system.in, over here I've got system.out, so we see kind of some parallel things happening there. So at this point we need this line, and then all we have to do is get the input. So whatever input we want to get. Now there's no recipe for this. This is your design at this point. So let's pretend like we want to get someone's name, right? I want to really break down the steps. A lot of programming is just about being able to break down your thought process. So again, our task is going to be, let's get someone's name. I'm actually going to take it one step farther and say, and store it. Remember all the things that a computer can do: input, output, store, and process. So we want to actually store it. So first, I need to know a little bit about storing information. Since we said we wanted to get a name is a word, right? It's a bunch of different characters or letters put together. So when you want to store a word or a bunch of letters together, it could be a word, a sentence, a paragraph, there is a certain type that we need to know about. It's called a string. So it does start with a capital S. We will learn more about it later, but it's called a string. And a string helps us store a sequence of characters or letters. That includes spaces and numbers and punctuation. Notice that all of these are comments. The only line of code I've written is this one, and I've imported my class here. So now I'm going to actually write some code. I'm going to do what's called declaring a string. And we get to choose what we want to call this string. So we know that in our computer, this is going to be stored somewhere in the hard drive, probably pointed to by some memory address location, right? A number, something that's not very pretty. The great thing about Java and these high-level languages is we get to say, hey, I want to store a bunch of letters, right? And anytime I use the word name, in this case, I want you to go get all those letters. I'm talking about that memory address, that space on my hard drive that contains letters. So this, if I put a semicolon, all this does is say, hey, there's somewhere on my computer I'm going to store a bunch of letters, right? And I'm going to access it using the word name. We'll talk more about variable naming later, but this is a good name. It's descriptive, right? It makes sense. So this is declaring it. You can see I ended it with a semicolon here. Now, instead of just saying, hey, I want to store a name, the next thing I can do is say, I want that name to have a value. So I'm going to say that name has the value, so equals, and then I could say something like Dr. Agar. Now, do note that it does have to be in quotations. If I left these out, it would have a red line underneath it and not work. So what this is going to do is create a string named name, and then in that location in my computer, name is going to store all of these letters in this sequence, including the period, including the space, including capitalization. I know we haven't gotten to input yet, but let's note that I can do something like system.out.println name. Now notice that printing out name is different than printing out hello Java programmers. Hello Java programmers is enclosed in quotations, so it actually printed out the words hello Java programmers. By leaving off the quotations here, what I'm telling Java, what I'm telling my computer is that I don't want to print out the word name. I want to print out whatever name is referring to. In our case, it's saying, oh, name is referring to a string of letters, right? A bunch of letters. And if I actually go look at name, it's got this value in it, Dr. Agar. So what's going to happen here, hopefully you can imagine that this is actually going to print the name, Dr. Agar, or those letters to the screen. Now I'd like to take a second and before I run this, make you think about where this is going to be printed to the screen. So this is a great time to talk about flow of control or the sequence of instructions. So when I click this run button, and I have not clicked it yet, what's going to happen is Java is going to go into this method and it's going to look at every single line one after another and execute them. So the first thing that's going to happen, we're going to skip over the comments. Java doesn't see those. But we're going to say print out hello Java programmers. You'll see this printed. Then it's going to say welcome. You'll see that printed. To your first programming video. You'll see that printed. And then this is done. This doesn't have anything to do with printing things out, so you won't see anything happen down here. But this does happen behind the scenes. We create a scanner object and then create a string name, set that name's value to Dr. Agar, and then we should see the name printed out here. Now, the interesting question is going to be, is name going to print out right here? See my cursor at the bottom on this same line as the word video? Or is Dr. Agar going to print out on the following line? Let's run it and see. So you can see here that even though this is a print line statement, a little bit tricky, right? Print line statements ensure that Dr. Agar is printed and then a new line. See how that happened up here with hello Java programmers, then the new line, right? So then because this statement, the statement right before Dr. Agar was just a normal print without a new line, it said, to your first programming video, the cursor was left right here, so then it printed Dr. Agar and a new line. Okay, now let's get to actually reading an input. At this point, we have not gotten input. I hard-coded this in. At no point did we ask the user for information. What I'd like to do is change this so that instead of having Dr. Agar in here, I can have the user put whatever name they'd like. So what I'd like to do is I'd really like this program to say, hello Java programmers, welcome to your first programming video. Then I would like on a new line for it to say, please enter your name. We know how to do that. That's just a print line statement where we put the letters in that make the sentence, please enter your name. Then I want it to actually grab the name, store it, and print out thank you, comma, whatever that name is. So let's start by prompting them for their name. So the cool thing now that you know about comments is that we can comment out this code. See how I've made this a comment now? You'll see programmers do that all the time. Here's string name. Before I give name a value, currently there's nothing stored in there. I want to prompt the user to enter their name. So system.out.println, enter your name, put my semicolon, and then that should prompt them to enter their name. Now, no magic happened. It doesn't do anything beyond that, but I always like to pause and run it and make sure that it's still working. So it says, welcome to your first programming video, enter your name. I don't like that this is on the same line, so I'm going to change this to a print line statement. Notice that one is going to cause the new line after here. Save, run. And now you can see that it's working the way I want it to. So enter your name. Then I actually want to store in this variable name whatever it is that they enter. Now this is not code that I'm writing. This is just, I'm going to say my name is Bob or Brenda or Heather, right? And it's going to grab that, and I actually want that value to be here, just like Dr. Agar was when we hard-coded this in. So the way that we do this is we use this scanner object that we created. I named mine keyboard. Again, in your textbook, you might have seen it named something different. But I'm going to say whatever this name is, keyboard.next. And what this is going to do is this is going to get the next word. So this actually would not work if I were to enter Dr. Agar. It would just get doctor because it's going to look for a space and kind of grab anything up into a space. If we wanted to get the whole thing, we would say next line. And as you can probably imagine, that's going to get everything until the user pushes the enter key, so the full line. I'm going to work with next for now, but do note that next line is an option. And so I've said name equals keyboard.next. So what this is going to do is it's going to wait until the user enters something. Now, if I run this program at this point, notice that it doesn't look like anything changed. I reran the program. It says, hello, Java programmers. Welcome to your first programming video. Enter your name. Like, well, I have this extra line of code here, but nothing looks different. I do want you to notice that one thing has changed, and that is this red stop button. This stop button, or you can see if I hover over it, it says terminate. This now appears because the program is still running. What it's doing is it's paused. It's just waiting for a user to enter input. Think about if you load Google Chrome, right? It's just going to sit here. It's not going to actively do anything until I type something in, right? Then it's going to actually start doing things. But while the user's not entering anything, it just kind of sits there static. So because our interface isn't as pretty, sometimes we don't notice that the program's running, but this little red button will be a good indicator. So it's actually waiting for me to enter the name. If I click down here, I can now act as if I'm the user. And I can say something like, my name is Mark. You'll always be able to see if it's user input. It'll turn green. Depending on your settings, you can change that, but the default is green here. Notice that nothing's happened yet. Nothing's going to happen until I push enter. So I'm going to push return or enter on my keyboard. And you can actually see it still doesn't look like anything happened, but the program finished. There were no more instructions to execute. So the stop button went away, and you can see it says it terminated. What I would like to do, just so that I can tell that this worked, is I want to system.out.println hello, comma, with the name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this line out, and I'm going to say system.out.println, and again, we want it to say hello, Mark. What I don't want to do is this. And this is a bad idea, though it may look like it works. If I save it and run it, you can see it says, hello, Java programmers, welcome. Enter your name, Mark. Hello, Mark. Ah, man, we aced this assignment. If I were to run this and enter Carol, this is hello, Mark. I hard-coded the word Mark in here. I don't want it to hard-code. I want to use whatever it is that they gave me. So think about these green letters, right? This string of letters being placed exactly where this line of code is. So name equals whatever's in green. So just like we had name being stored to Dr. Agar, this is going to have name stored as Carol or Mark or Brenda or whatever, right? So instead of saying hello, Mark, again, I don't want to say hello, name like this either. And you may think, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to say hello and then reference name. The problem is, because this is in the quotes, what's going to happen? It's going to actually print, no matter if my name is Sue, it's going to print hello name, right? We don't want it to actually print the words name. So I'm going to say hello with a space. I'm going to make this a print so that we don't go to a new line. And then I'm going to say system.out.println name without quotes. That way it accesses whatever was stored in name. And again, it's going to be whatever we enter in green upon the next running. So save it, run it. We'll use my dog's name. Copper, enter, hello, Copper. So good job. This is input, output. You now know a little bit about strings, how to store a string of characters or letters. The very last thing that we'll touch on in this video is what if you wanted to read in a number. So instead of just reading in strings, and see how that was stored in a name, which was type string here, we could also read in a number. How old are you? Something like that, right? So there's going to be a lot of different types in Java. If I want to interact with a bunch of characters or letters all in a sequence, that's going to be a string. If I want to interact with a whole number, that's going to be something called an int. There will be all kinds of different types that we'll learn about later, but for right now, let's look at the basic numeric type which is going to be an int, I-N-T. This is all lowercase, and so just like I created a string name up here, I'm going to create an int. Let's call it age. Let's say maybe after asking their name, we're going to say hello, whatever their name is, and then ask them to enter their age. Okay? So we're going to do int age. Again, this is my variable name. You can name this whatever you want. Age makes sense to me. You can't use spaces in your variable names. And so this is saying somewhere in my computer, I want enough space to store an int or a whole number. Think 0, 1, 2, 3, 10, 100. It could be negative numbers, but not something with a decimal. So an int is a whole number. Again, we'll dive more into these types later. You just need to know some basics so that you can work with input and output. So if I said something like, my age is 25, right? Then I can say something like system.out.println age. And what this is going to do is if I run this, it's going to print out, enter your name. We'll say this is Gigi, hello Gigi, and then you can see it's actually printing out the value stored in 25. I can say, let's print out your age minus 10. We'll learn more about math later, but can you see what this is probably going to do? It's going to print out, we'll do Gigi again, it's going to print out 15. So instead of hard coding this number in, I want to get it from the user. So if you kind of glance up here, the way that we got something from the user is here we were storing it in name, so name equals. Here we're going to store it in age, so age equals, right? Notice that even though these two lines are different, this is kind of broken up on two different lines here, just with a print line statement in between or output in between. Here I've got it on the same line, but this is the same thing as doing something like int age, and then on the next line, age equals. So this is synonymous here. I'm going to leave it on the same line just to expose you to that. And so up here, I said keyboard.next. Here I'm going to follow a similar pattern. I'm going to say keyboard dot. Again, notice that there's all these different methods. One of them you can see is one of the first ones that pops up. It's called next int. You can actually just click on that one and it'll populate it for you. Next int with a capital I there. So what this is going to do is it's going to grab the next int or the next integer from the keyboard. If you hover over it, Eclipse will almost always tell you exactly what it does. So this is going to grab something that they enter and store it in the age. Now, if I run this, enter your name, we'll say Howard. Hello, Howard. It doesn't look like it's working, but again, notice the red square. That means the program's running. It printed the name, right? Hello, Howard. And it's actually waiting at this line. So you can always just kind of trace through your code from a top-down order. It's waiting on this line. So the problem is I didn't prompt. I didn't say enter your age this time. We like to have prompts in there. Just it's nicer for the user, right? Hopefully you can see that. So I'm going to, before this line, say system.out.println, enter your age. And note that I did it before this line so that it would print out enter your age before waiting to enter the age. It's going to execute these in sequence, so you want to ask for the age before you try to read it in. So I'm going to run it, enter your name. We'll do Howard again. Hello, Howard, enter your age. He's going to be 19, enter. And because we were printing age minus 10, it prints 9, so that checks out. So just as a brief review, in this video, you've had your very first look at writing a program. You've written hello world, hello Java programmers. You should know the difference between print and print line, so these two methods here. You should know where to write your code in the main method, so between these inner sets of curly braces from now on. You know a little bit about working with Eclipse. We've worked with the console, We've created a package, we've created a class, we've worked with input and output through the console here. You've seen some errors and some warnings. Again, this is going to continue to be a warning for a little bit. We're not going to worry about the yellow warnings. You know about comments, about importing the scanner class and then using it. I know when learning to program, it's a lot like just being thrown in the deep end of a pool. So hang in there. A lot of this stuff looks like brand new, really crazy information. I promise in the upcoming weeks, if you stick with this, you will understand everything that's written here. You'll understand why there's dots here, why these parentheses are blank and these have something in there. It will all become clear. But at this point, you kind of have to do some sheer memorization. System.out.println. You've got the word string, that variable type versus an int. You do have to know how to create a scanner object and how to import it. Even this part is really important to kind of know. Almost every programmer is going to know the words public static void, main string, arg. So I would go ahead and try to commit that into memory in case you ever use an IDE or a program like Eclipse that does not autofill that for you. So that's it for this video. See you next time.